Hey there, folks. I'm Matt Hansen,
And I'm John Johnson.
and you're listening to Planes, Trains, and Comic Books, the podcast where we discuss favorites we've reread, both classic and new comics we want to read, and everything else in between.
And here's the comic we picked this week.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of
Planes, Trains, and Comic Books.
Today we are reading, or we read, the book that I didn't know was tied to Philadelphia, so that's kind of funny. It is called Nita Hawes' Nightmare Blog, and this is like literally a spin-off series of Philadelphia, so that's kind of cool. Didn't know it. I knew it was the same writer, but I did not realize it was a direct spin-off. Did you know that?
No, not at all. We, when we picked the ones for our February poll, we just kind of picked some that were either interesting or we had heard some good things about. And obviously, we read Philadelphia by Rodney Barnes, but this would just happened to be another one. I was like, hey, it looked good, and you had said you'd heard some good things about it, so yeah. But I had no idea it was connected.
Yeah, I heard really good things about it, and that's why I was like, oh, let me check this out. But no one ever said, oh, it's part of the Philadelphia universe or whatever. And I actually liked that a lot. I thought it kind of gave more lore to Philadelphia. Like it made me like Philadelphia more just because there's like a bigger world out there of this. Because, when you read Philadelphia, you're like, okay, so what's happening down the street, in the next city? Philadelphia is pretty close to a lot of other places. And if there's vampires here, what's going on in other places? So it was nice to see, oh, this is what's going on in another place. So I thought that was fun. But yeah, this was part of our Patreon poll, so thank you, patrons, for choosing this one. Just to get this out of the way, if you would like to be a patron, you get to vote on our second episode of each month, and you get an exclusive. Our exclusive this month is the book Truth, which was the second place winner of our poll. And that is basically like the original, like Captain America was not the first test subject of the Super Soldier Project. They tested it on a black man first, because I guess you want to test science on them first before you try it on a white person. So that is Truth is the man that ended up becoming like the black Captain America, we'll say, from that project. And so, yeah, that's kind of the basis for that one. So that'll be fun, and we'll release that next week. But yeah, like I said, this was the poll winner of for the second podcast. So if you would like to become a patron and vote on that and get the exclusives, you can join at patreon.com/planes, trains, and comic books, all one word. And with that, we'd like to thank our patrons, Hoku, Otaku, Mike, Christian, Matthew, Kyla, Joseph, and Kalia. Thank you very much, guys.
Yeah, we appreciate you so much.
Yes, and I hope you guys noticed the difference in John's audio, because we were able to get a new mic for him with the money from Patreon. So thank you very much. And Nita Hawes is a book I'd heard a lot about, especially from like horror circles. People were like, "Oh, this is great." Now, I actually heard more about Nita Hawes than Philadelphia. I assume you hadn't really heard of either, right, John?
I'd only heard of Philadelphia, and again, it was only because Ronnie Barnes was on my radar, because I really wanted to check out his Blackula continuation.
Yeah. So the first volume of this is called The Fire Next Time. And it is by Rodney Barnes and Sean Alexander, only because I think Sean Alexander is a co-creator of Philadelphia. And since this is a spinoff, I guess he gets credit for that too. But then there was 3 artists in this book. You kind of noticed it more than I did, where it changed in the middle. I didn't hate it though. It didn't really distract me too much, but you said you had an issue with it.
Not necessarily an issue, just like I don't know specifically always when it's because of the way the art can be done nowadays. I don't always know when it's digital or when it's hand drawn right away, unless it's like super, super obvious, like Alex Ross or something. But
right, or like Batman White Knight or something, where it's like, oh, that's obviously the dude.
But I will say, between Patrice Reynolds, I really like the first chapter's art, and then it goes into 2 and 3 by Well B. And I felt like that was a little more digital. It was still fine. Like, I didn't take me out of it either, but I really enjoyed the beginning and the end art, especially. Was it that one's Simon
Kodransky?
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I don't know, maybe it was because there was a lot more horror elements in those chapters.
He pretty much only does horror books, so I know him from a lot of other horror books, and he does a really good job with that stuff. And also, he's got a lot of like fine line detail and whatnot. So I like his art style a lot.
Yeah, so I mean, overall, I like the art through all of it. I just really like when there's a little bit of a break from. I guess, like I said, it felt more like maybe that was digital art. I didn't enjoy it as much.
Sometimes you don't know because like they do digital color it and everything, right? So sometimes it's a little harder to tell if this was on paper and then they scanned it in and digital colored it, or if it's all digital. But yeah, I don't know. I didn't notice it at all. Pretty much like the only things I noticed in the art that kind of bugged me, we'll touch on, but it wasn't anything like big. So it's just little things that I'll point out as we go along. But in this book, we start off in Baltimore, Maryland, or that's where this book takes place, which is fun because they do mention Philadelphia on the first page because Nita Hawes lives in Baltimore, and apparently she dated Jim Jr., who is the main character of Philadelphia, and he left her to go. To Philadelphia to see his father's death, but then he just stayed there through the events of Philadelphia. So she's kind of feeling left here ever since he left, and she's kind of missing him. I guess he hasn't contacted her because she's like, I don't know where the fuck he went. So, we were an item, but now I'm alone, and that's how we start off with her feeling like, I'm left here. And I also like, he throws this in because obviously Philadelphia is just a play on the town name of Philadelphia, but people get killed there. I like that she calls Baltimore Bodymore Murderland instead of Maryland. So that was funny, I thought. And I don't know much about Maryland or Baltimore other than The Wire, so I'm just gonna believe everything they say in this comic is how it is. So because I believe everything about Maryland. So
yeah,
from that.
All I know is the Ravens and Edgar Allan Poe. So.
Oh, see, I didn't even think about that. So you're more into football than I am, but yeah. So right away, we see Nita walking down the sidewalk. She's kind of recounting her relationship with Jimmy and all that, and she's saying how she's alone. But then she turns a corner and runs into a giant Cthulhu kind of monster. And right away, I was like, okay, I'm on board with this. Like the third page being this giant Cthulhu monster. What'd you think of that, John?
Oh yeah, right. Like I was sucked in this first issue right away.
Yes. Yeah, I thought this issue did a really good job, more than Philadelphia did. Because if you remember, me and you were both confused a little bit about the pacing and the way the story was being told in the pages, like about the how the story flowed in Philadelphia issue 1. But This one was no issue at all. So that might have just been like the way he wanted to tell Philadelphia, and it just kind of was confusing because he had a specific thing in mind, like the way he wanted it to flow. But this had a much more normal kind of flow. Very easy to follow. And I'll say this is why. I think maybe he learned a lesson from Philadelphia or something, but every time they change location, they say what that location is. So if they go from inner city Baltimore, it will say inner city Baltimore, and then the page will happen. And then they switch to a new area, like right away we cut to Cherry Hill, and it says Cherry Hill. And now we're in a new place, so we know that it's different. So that does help for sure. But in Cherry Hill, there's like we get some like narration from, we don't know who, but it's obviously a bad person, because like red words on black text boxes is always a fun thing. That's how you know they're evil, because it's red.
Because it's red.
Yeah. And there's a recording artist who's recording an album, and I thought this was like a great way to introduce this demon or whatever, but we don't know why why this demon would care about a recording artist. You kind of think like, well, maybe the guy like sold his soul and the demon's coming to get him or something, but because that's usually what happens with musicians, right? Like you think like Robert Johnson and the Crossroads and all that. Like, okay, obviously, if you have a musician and a demon in a story, it's probably going to be selling soul of some kind. But usually it's for like musical talent or something. So, but in this, the demon just walks into this recording studio right in the middle of the session and just transforms and tears everybody apart. And the demon is in the body of like an old man, no one, like an older black man, and no one knows like who he is. He's just walking around. His eyes are red when he's possessed, and then as he like unleashes his fury, we see all these like demon animals coming out of his mouth. He's basically like Tremors, you know, like the graboids that come out of your mouth. Except they're like in the shape of like insects and other animals and whatnot. And I think that's supposed to be like a reference, because they do reference it later, like, or they mention it later, that like demons have been known to take the shape of human or of animals, like, and humans combined. So like animal head with a human body. And so like that's supposed to signify demons. So that makes sense that that's the shapes that come out. But he literally, like, graboids come out and just like grab everybody and tear them apart, like heads ripped off. It's very violent, very gory. I was into it, and immediately I was like, okay, like I'm not the biggest vampire fan, so Philadelphia was kind of like, yeah, it was good, but it's like vampires. This was way more my speed, because I'm big fan of like Supernatural, big fan of Hellblazer and things like that are lots of more like demony supernatural stuff. I like that more than vampires. So this was definitely up my alley more. What about you, John? Do you have a preference for either type?
I wouldn't say I have maybe I would say I have a preference, because I really do. I am a sucker for vampire stories in general, usually. So, I guess I would say probably I felt like I was going to be, but overall, I did feel like I leaned into this one more than Philadelphia. At least from the get go.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense, because like I said, it is a little bit easier to follow, at least in the initial thing. And there's a lot of like big action sequences right away. Whereas in Philadelphia, there was a bit of a build up. Like there was the like initial, like, oh, the dad is on the tracks of someone and then he gets attacked by a bunch of vampires, but that was the only violence. And then it, like, you got to take time with the son to solve the mystery. Whereas this, there's the Cthulhu monster that surprises. And then there's this kill scene in the recording studio. So, yeah.
And then he's singing the whole time too.
Oh yeah. That's another thing. He's singing songs, and we've learned later that he is like an old blues singer, the guy. So like, the guy who's possessed. So that makes sense. And not only that, he's not singing old blues songs. It seems like he's making them up as he commits each of his crimes. Like the songs tend to relate to what he's doing. Which I thought was fun. It's like a new song each time. It could have been very easy to do the same song each time, or like sing actual lyrics from, actual songs. They might have had to pay someone if they did that, though. So it makes sense if they didn't have to do that. But so as of right now, we don't really know too much about Nita. So we actually cut to her once this murder is finished, and she works at Morgan State University as what is she, like parapsychology?
Parapsychology professor.
Yes. So, she's just going through, I guess, like, she's talking about Dante's Inferno and angels and stuff. So it's a lot of that kind of stuff, like more religion, but in the way of like, what does this mean psychologically? I'm assuming, like,
yeah,
what do these mean about humans in psychology, right? So, like, why would you come up with a sun god, or Thor, or whatever, those kind of things? But also, at least in this first time we see her teaching, they're talking about just devils, demons, and angels, and God and stuff from Christianity. But she does say, like, when other students begin to question some of her teaching, she's like, we're not talking about Christianity, though. We're talking about like you go to religion class if you want to debate the merits of Christianity. We're here to just talk about these things are in our psychology, because we're humans and some people believe them. So let's figure out why. And so, yeah, she's kind of a skeptic, but then at the same time, she does have an interesting supernatural connection going on. We find out about later. Now, the only thing I did have a question about is, when did, in that opening scene when she's walking, when did that happen? Like, when did she run into that Cthulhu monster? Is that later on and we just like jumped back, or did that happen?
I think that was just supposed to be like her in general. That's what goes on. It was just like an initial introduction. Just kind of like this could totally be like I'll spoil ahead. this totally felt like it could be an ongoing series, something like we meet her, and then that's the that was the catch to get you in, was like this fucking crazy ass monster she stumbled upon in an alleyway.
Right.
Um, and I don't think it was necessarily that specifically was meant to be tied to anything except that this kind of shit happens to her.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's more like if you're gonna have established Scooby Doo or whatever, you're gonna have like the first mystery that they solve immediately, and then it's like, okay, guys, now let's go to the new mystery, and then so like what they do right away, or like
Exactly
what's going on. So, so yeah, we do find out like she does have a little supernatural thing where she had a brother who died, and she sees potentially a ghost of him. She sees him talking to her, but she is thinking that it's not supernatural. It is more of her mind. This makes sense too, because she's like, a psychologist or whatever. So she's like, this is all a figment of my head. This is how my brain is dealing with the death of my brother. So like she talks to essentially the ghost of her dead brother, but she doesn't think it's really his ghost. So, yeah. So anyway, once that scene at the school is over, we cut to the crime scene of the cops finding this recording studio full of gore. And I mean, it's literally like torsos thrown everywhere, heads everywhere. There is a painting in blood on the wall of a horse-headed man, kind of, like I said, alluding to like demons who take the shape of human and an animal head. But these detectives, what's the main detective's name? I don't remember her name.
Her name is Detective Frankie Harden.
There you go. So Frankie is like the lead detective on this, and she seems pretty capable as far as like right away she notices there are like blood soaked or blood stains on the floor in the shape of feet. So she's like, oh, the person was barefoot. And yeah, like that's kind of a weird thing, right? And like I think people even said, oh, it was like an old man who did it or whatever. It's like, well, so like an old man did this and then was barefoot. That doesn't make any sense because all these people are torn apart, right? So
yeah.
But as she's kind of following these footprints, I feel like she's just got a lot of trauma from like past things, because they show like her looking at a memorial of someone who died in a certain area as she follows these footprints, and she begins to cry. So it's like, okay, it seems like she's getting affected by a lot of these murders, especially these really gruesome ones, right? Like, I mean, who wouldn't? But she definitely is having PTSD from this kind of stuff. Yeah. So then we cut to Nita, and like I said, she's at her house, and it just happens to be her brother's birthday, and she's lighting candles for him. But as she's talking to him, we see that he's got a headshot wound from a gunshot. So turns out her brother was killed by some like senseless violence in the middle of the street. He was just a bystander and got shot in the head. And the police officer that was at the scene for that was actually Frankie. So there's like a relationship kind of there just because they know each other. They haven't come into contact yet, like officially, with all this other murder stuff, but they do show that Frankie and Nita were aware of each other, because Frankie was also part of the, like, her parent, or Nita's parents got murdered as well. And so Frankie was part of that, that investigation too. So it seems like Frankie's quite familiar with Anita and has seen her grow up a bit, because Anita's in like, what would you say she is? 20, in her 20s, late 20s?
Yeah, I was gonna say late 20s, and it seemed like Frankie, yeah, obviously because she saw 9 years ago Nita's parents died, and then Jason, her brother,
Yeah,
died 2 years
so
ago.
she has to at least be like 32 or something, right? Like
Yeah.
mid 30s or something. So
Yeah,
a little bit older, but yeah, enough to be like the head detective or part of an investigation for her brother. And then same with, like, she was obviously younger when Nita's parents died. So, but that's like just an establishing, like, they do know each other, which I liked. I thought that was a good way to establish that relationship. They didn't have to reintroduce her, like when they first meet. It's not like, oh, you again, I remember this. It was like, it was already like in the background, told well through the story. But then we cut to this assisted living home, or like, I don't want to say compound, but what do they call it? Assisted living
Retirement home. Yeah.
retirement home. There you go. It's called Happy Acres, and we see a janitor, and he's cleaning the floors, and he sees all these bloody footprints. He's like, "What the fuck?" And then he follows them to a man's room, and as he hears some singing coming from the door, and as he goes in, he sees an old black man who is comatose, except he's covered in blood, and obviously there's bloody footprints. So this is the guy that killed all the people in that recording studio, and that seems like almost impossible because he is in a comatose state in this like assisted living place. So it's kind of like, okay, well, obviously there's demon possession going on here. So and then we cut back to Nita's house, and we see that she has a, as you might have guessed from the title, a nightmare blog. Now, I didn't quite understand why, like what the blog was about, other than like you would think it would be about like violence or something, right? Like street violence, but it's like supernatural focused. Do they say why it's supernatural focused?
Yeah, it's because weird shit happens when around Bodymore Murderland a lot, and it's when it's something not seemingly normal and the cops can't explain it. She hopes that people will find their way here because she has this interesting connection to the supernatural, and that she can be some kind of she can try to be that hope and help to those people.
Well, that's what they say later on, though, but that's not in this first issue. I think it's just that her brother said, you should start this blog. And, it's her brother in her mind. She's thinking, oh, this is just like the inner parts of my mind. So maybe I'll start this blog and it will be somewhat healing to me. But yeah, later on they do say like, oh, she's kind of aware now of supernatural things because we do find out later on that her brother is actually a ghost. And he explains in this at the end of this issue that like, okay, he got shot, he went into like limbo, he followed some pathways, saw hell, and he was like, well, I could move on to to the next plane, whatever that is. I'm assuming it's not hell, but he's looking at hell, and he sees all the demons fly back towards Earth, or out to, I guess, living, and he's like, well, I don't want my sister to get hurt or whatever, and I got to be there, and maybe I can help her. So he followed the demons back to Baltimore, and that's why he's back here. So he tells her that, finally, I guess, and also tells us that, obviously. So, and so because she's got this nightmare blog, it doesn't seem like she has many followers. People can post on it and say like, hey, I got a ghost here, or I got this thing. And she's saying like most of the time it's like fake people or people who are trying to like either make money from it or get something out of it with their stories. But the guy, the janitor from this assisted living home, he's like, he just happens to type in like Paranormal Investigator Baltimore, and Nita Hawes' blog comes up, and he's like, oh, well, she's like a sister who's got this blog. I'm gonna type on this. I'm gonna like post on this forum or whatever. And so he posts his story of, hey, I got a patient who is super comatose, but he's also like not comatose. He's covered in blood half the time, and he's singing, and I think he's a demon. And he tells her like that it's at this assisted living home. And then immediately as he's typing that, he hears really loud singing coming from the man's room. And as he goes in there with a bat, I like this shot a lot. He is very surprised to see the man is actually crawling on the ceiling. His head is turned backwards, and he's about to fucking murder this janitor. So that was a good way to end that issue. I thought it was fun. But yeah, then we start off the second issue with Nita, and like it says, she has nightmares, right? I guess she just kind of records her nightmares in this blog, I assume. And so she's having horrible nightmares about her parents dying and things like that. And then we get like some history on what's been going on. Who is this old man, right? So we start off in Cars Beach, Annapolis, Maryland in 1963. There was like a carnival going on, and two white guys are going into this area of town that is predominantly black, and they are recording artists. They were recording producers. So they're scouting for people to sign, but also you can tell by the way they talk about people. And I really liked the way that he wrote them. It's that like passive racism or whatever, like where it's like, oh, this is just how white people talked back in the day because that's like was acceptable, where they're like, oh, like these darkies or whatever. Like, they'll just throw out words that you're like, whoa, they just talked about people like that. Okay. Or they talk about like Martin Luther King, like, oh, he's gallivanting across the country, stirring up trouble. And like, it's like, oh, okay, well, yeah, it's not necessarily passive, but it's like, it's not like KKK members, but it's like the acceptable racism of the day, you know?
Yeah. I guess the more mainstream to where, yeah, it's not the extreme of like, maybe like physically harming, but it's still,
right. They will take advantage of you if you're black. That is what we get from this conversation that they're having, because like I said, they're scouting for black musicians because that's all the rage and people like this music that they don't even quite get, but they're like, it's hot. So fuck it. We'll just sign some of these guys if we can. And the one that they're scouting for is this guy named Howlin' Henry. And very much, I would say I don't know if this is actually I don't think he's a real blues singer. Have you ever heard of him?
Not specifically, no.
Okay. So I would assume he's supposed to be like a, what's his name? Robert Johnson. Well, yeah, obviously there's Howlin'.
It's Howlin' Wolf.
Howlin' Wolf,
I thought maybe.
I mean, it's probably an amalgamation of a bunch of those guys, right? But
that's true.
But I just, because Robert Johnson played guitar and looks a lot like this guy, like as far as dress wise when he was younger, and then also he sold his soul to the devil at the crossroads in lore, right? So, just a thought on that. But like, yeah, obviously his name is probably something to do with Howlin' Wolf as well. So, but they go to his performance and they're like, oh man, we want to sign you. Then we cut back to modern day where we see the police are now at a crime scene in that old man's room, Howlin' Henry's room, because now he is a comatose old man in this retirement home. And in his room, there is the decapitated body of the janitor from the previous issue. And they're like, what the hell? And the crime scene is very similar to the one in the recording studio from before. And so it's, and there's even like a horse-headed man drawn on the wall. I do appreciate that they drew a dick on that man. Cause they didn't have to, but I appreciate that they went all out, cause what's the point?
That's just the blood dripping. What are you talking about?
Is that what it is? It's in both. No, it's in both.
It's definitely a wiener.
Yeah. It's in both. So that horseman is hung like a horse, we could say. But because of this, there definitely seems to be some kind of supernatural thing with this. And Nita has a supernatural blog. Frankie, the cop who is also heading up that investigation of this janitor's death, because it's tied to it seems to be tied to the death at the recording studios. She's like, okay, well, I'm going to go talk to Nita because she's got a nightmare blog. And also the guy, I guess they probably looked at his computer and saw that he had logged on and left a comment on her blog. So she gets in touch with her. Then we get like the back story between Frankie and her. They seem to have a fairly good relationship. There's no like weirdness. Like as a cop, Frankie seems to be a good cop, like she's doing her job correctly. And she's not like, you could see like there could have been tension if Nita thought maybe the cops dropped the ball on her brother's investigation or her parents' investigation. And that could have been there, right? That like fighting, but that wasn't there. So,
yeah.
And surprisingly, and I don't think this would happen in real life, but obviously this is a comic, so who gives a shit? But Nita's like, hey, like if I'm going to help you with this case, I need to see the crime scene. And Frankie's like, okay, but you can't touch anything. I was like, I don't think that would be happening.
Probably not.
And she's like taking pictures with her iPhone and shit. I'm like, Yeah, that definitely wouldn't be flying, I'm assuming. But yeah, so they're looking at the body, and the whole time they're in this room. I thought this was funny too. The cops just left the old man in there. He's comatose. He's in his bed, but like there was a dead body. There was all this shit. They didn't seem to move or do anything with the old man, even though his feet were covered with blood. So yeah, this is interesting techniques some of the police have, I guess. I guess since they cleaned the room, they were like, well, it's fine. We can put him back here. But they do mention like, oh, he looks very like unkempt, like he's not taken care of very much. Then that kind of leads in back into 1963, where the producers are talking to Hal and Henry when he's young, and they want him to sign with them. They're like, you can do whatever you want. Here's a contract. So of course, Hal and Henry, not being stupid, is like, hey, I got to take this to a lawyer I trust because, you know, I don't really trust these white guys to protect my interest as an artist. Because as you might know, the recording industry isn't really known for fair deals, even with...
What are you talking about?
Even with white artists, but specifically with black artists back in the day, they lost like a lot of their rights to music and whatnot. So Hal and Henry goes to a black lawyer, and the black lawyer looks it over and is just like, you're all good, man. Don't even read it. Sign right here. I don't know about you, John, but I could instantly tell this guy was full of shit. Did you get that?
I felt like it was okay first until he said, should I sign it? And the guy's like, yeah, right away. I don't think this is ever going to get any better.
Surely no better offer will ever come to you. Yeah.
Why would it be right away in front of the lawyer?
Yeah. Yeah. So then we get the history of, okay, this guy, you know, with his deal went on to record a bunch of records with these two recording executives. And he was very, very famous and sold a bunch of records. But then the second we find out, or the second that like the music taste changed, because, you know, we go from the early 60s to the late 60s where you have, you know, the civil rights movement and all that stuff, a lot more protest songs, you know, of different style of music, right? Like than blues. So because he's fallen out of fashion, they're like, well, I mean, you cannot record any more music ever again because you signed away like your recording rights as an artist. So like you can't go, you know, obviously we're done. We're not going to keep you anymore because your records don't sell like they used to, but you can't go to another place and record. You can only play your music live from now on, which I was like, holy shit, that's a fucked up contract, but I'm sure that actually exists somewhere.
Yeah.
But, so then I guess, you know, he's pretty much destitute for the rest of his life because, you know, he can only play live, which probably isn't making you the kind of money that record sales was. So, and also like, you know, he's a black blues musician. I can't imagine like they said, everything's kind of selling lower in general, which means your people going to your concerts are not selling well either, you know?
Yeah, and you're not going to have like blues artists in general are not going to have they don't have this normally the same mainstream as like a pop or even like a mainstream like country or
R&B or anything. Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, for sure. It's kind of like an older style of music that most people, I mean, every now and like in the 80s and early 90s, you had like Stevie Ray Vaughan, but that's like barely, I don't know. It's blues playing, right? But it's not like the same style of blues that this guy was playing, right? Like it's that like rock blues or whatever. And it's a white guy doing it too, which is another level of irony, I think. But anyway, so we cut away from that horrible contract negotiation to Nita, who's now at a church and she's talking to a pastor, and the pastor, she's showing the pictures that she took of like the horse imagery that was painted in blood in the room of Hal and Henry. And, you know, he explains that, oh yeah, some demons were told to have like horse heads or animal heads and human bodies. But then he's also like, well, you know, it would really help if you came to church. And she's like, what the fuck? Like, and I thought I was like, this is not the time, Father. Like, Like, I came here for a specific reason. What'd you think of this scene, John, with this preacher? He annoyed the fuck out of me, but
Oh no, same thing. Like it's like I'm here for like specific questions. Yeah, like don't like give me the guilt trip while I'm coming to you for.
yeah, I don't need this. I don't need you to do this. So yeah, but that gave her a little bit of information. So she takes that information, starts looking up stuff online, and then as she learns about that, I think she also looks up Howlin' Henry to see exactly who he is, what his whole thing is online. So there's obviously newspaper articles and stuff about him, and then we cut to Howlin' Henry now. Like they say, like, oh, he was he just basically disappeared after like 1968 or whatever, and no one knows what happened to him. But now he's appearing in this old folks home, and then we cut to that old folks home, and Howlin' ain't comatose anymore. He is getting up out of bed. He is walking to a nice house. And we see an old black man sitting in a chair talking to his grandson. And Howlin' runs in that house and rips this old man apart. And I think we know who this old man is. They don't really say who he is, but he looks enough like that fucking lawyer that screwed him out of a bunch of money and everything that we can assume it is him. Now they made a point to show the kid running away. Now, do you think he killed that kid?
No, I don't think he killed that kid.
Okay. I'd only ask because he did later on. He kills other kids. So, but they don't show this one. So I was like, okay. They show the other one. So I didn't know if you thought how bad was this massacre. But they do have a very awesome page of him being torn apart. Now, this was my only kind of gripe with the art is this demon had like one finishing move, right? Like, like it was just Tremor's mouth and, finish him and then tear apart, right?
I'm sorry that the demon doesn't meet your standards of like, let's kill people in a different crazy way each time, sir.
Hey, it's not the demon. It's the artist. The artist is the one who's visualizing how this happens. So it wasn't a problem here. I thought this was cool because we've only seen him do it one other time. But by issue 6, he's still doing this finishing move. I'm like, all right, let's vary it up a bit, let's change it up. Let's do something else. But, that's just a preference. That's a personal preference of mine. So you didn't seem to have a problem, right? You didn't care.
No, I mean, like, I will give it to you. Yeah. Like there's not too much variation other than like, I would say like they're the first couple ones they show are very like, I mean, this one's a full page splash of like just the body ripping apart and all the animals and stuff. I'd say you kind of infer that more going forward because you see some of it and there's still lots of blood, but like it's not as like big and in your face. So.
Right. I also feel like this murder was more violent than the other ones. Like, even though that maybe because it's just an old man sitting in a chair or something, but the first one was inside of a recording studio. Obviously now we know why that has significance because he was screwed out of money from these recording producers. So obviously maybe those engineers or the studio itself is to blame for, or the demon or whatever, or Howlin' Henry finds them to blame in some way for his lack of success. But so he killed them and they were torn apart, sure. But this old man sitting in his chair getting torn apart in front of his grandson, and then when they find him, it is blood all over the place, intestines all over the place, like spine showing from the lower half of his body pulled apart. Like his head is laying with like the lower jaw is still attached to the upper part of his body, and the rest of the head is now sitting just the upper teeth on the floor. I was like, holy shit, that's like pretty graphic, So I enjoyed it. I thought that was fun because that's what I want to see in a horror movie. And also we get the horse head man and his big dick again in the paint. So that was not an accident, John. They wanted you to see this hung horseman. All right. So
I will say I feel like the penis gets bigger each time. Too,
I do, and more descriptive or more described because because like this time you see some testicles as well. So hey, they're really going out on the drawing of this horse cock.
Let's just say the more he kills, the more it turns him on.
There you go. The more engorged, the more gore, the more engorged. There you go. So, but we cut to the police are now at this scene, and of course Frankie is there because this is tied with the horse drawing on the wall, this is tied to the other murders. So she calls Anita right away and is like, hey, we got another death. You got to come check this out. So Anita comes to look at it. Now, the third issue starts, and this was something I was like, I'm not sure how I feel about this, but I did know what this was right away. Did you know who Anansi is right away, or did you have to figure that out?
I had to figure it out. I didn't recall the name.
Okay. So there's Neil Gaiman. Now, this is all, once again, Neil Gaiman gives me all of my knowledge about gods and mythology. So there's a book by Neil Gaiman called Anansi Boys that is the actual sequel to American Gods. And so I knew all about the spider god, who's like an African god, who's like a trickster. I think he's actually the inspiration for Briar Rabbit, I want to say. Like, he's a trickster.
Okay.
I'm almost 100% on that, but I might have that wrong. But
I wasn't sure if it was like another type of like Loki, basically.
Yeah, it's like an African version of Loki, I guess. But
okay,
obviously those two things were totally different cultures. But, makes sense because people have more than one type of god that are very similar in different cultures. So, but yeah, so, okay. So they obviously we have...
What do you...
Wait, what?
No, I was joking. I was saying, what are you talking about? The Greek and the Roman gods are not any alike at all, sir.
Well, those are the exact same gods, but either one. So in this, we establish already, we know there's demons, right? Because we know there's possession going on. Now, they introduce right away the concept of angels. So, okay, there's definitely like a god side to that. And then we get this spider falling down and turning... Huh?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know if my dog started barking.
I can hear them, yes, but it's fine. Okay. Just tell them to shut up, John. But we get this spider falling down to the ground next to like a murder scene in the middle of Baltimore. And it's just a normal murder scene, it seems. Because, Baltimore, normal murders. So, this spider turns into a man, and we find out that this is the god Anansi. And so, yeah. What do you think of this character overall?
I thought it was interesting. Like, I like that he started as a spider. I like that he was, like you said, like, I guess it fits into the trickster. Like, he's able to shapeshift. And he's a very, you usually don't say cute spider, but the eyes make him look cute. Kind of looks like...
Really? He just reminded me of, like, arachnophobia at the end when you see the spider, like, the eyes looking at Jeff... What's his name?
Jeff Daniels.
Jeff Daniels, yeah. And
yeah.
You see the spider looking at him with his flamethrower, his makeshift flamethrower. Yeah, that's what he looked like. The eyes look exactly like that to me. So I'm like, I don't know. I don't find him cute at all. But fuck that spider, kill it. But yeah.
No, I'm normally with you. I guess my wife is growing. Some of them, like the little jumping spiders, growing on me because she wants one. But the answer is still no.
Fuck
and if
that.
you hear this now or 10 years from now, the answer is still no. Honey.
Yeah, no spiders.
But as a pet, come on now.
No,
anyway, but
no.
he was cool. I like that he changed. I liked he's a cool character. He grew on me.
Yeah, so I don't know why, but for some reason this took me out of it. I don't know if it's because so far we've been like straightforward like Christianity stuff. So it's like demons and angels or whatever, right? But like, and that's kind of my wheelhouse. Now, I will say, like, obviously in Hellblazer there's a lot more gods than just those ones, and it doesn't seem weird in that. But in this, it just kind of came out of nowhere, and I was like, all right, like, like we're just gonna throw Anansi in there. It just felt like, why is he here? But I guess he just wants to help. That's like, he's seen what's going on. Did they give a reason why he specifically is like, I got to help Nita out?
I don't think so. I think he felt the connection or something, but I don't think so.
He's just called here. That's what I got. So I think maybe that's why, like, it just happened. Whereas if there was like, maybe if she prayed or did something, or maybe the brother did something and then Anansi comes to the call, then I would have been like, oh yeah, that's what happened. Okay, that makes sense. But like, as it was, I was kind of like, huh. And it never quite sat well with me for the rest of the comic. It's just like, okay, there's this other god here from another mythology. But like, whatever, I'll go with it. It's a comic. But that was the only thing I was like, I just feel like he's at a place, at least because the way that he just shows up, you know? But yeah, so we cut to Nita, and she's talking to her little brother, the ghost of him or whatever. And I don't know, she is now starting to realize that he is actually a ghost. Like, she's kind of coming to terms with that, maybe with all this other supernatural stuff happening. She is saying, like, you know, I'm coming to terms with the fact that you're a ghost. Like, why did you stay here? Like, and he's like, you know, because I wanted to help you because you still feel guilty. And he wants her to, like, let go of that guilt. Basically, once she can do that, or once she can let go of it, he can kind of rest, because he'll be okay knowing that she's okay. I thought this scene was pretty touching, because they both have like a little moment where he says, "I love you," and she says, "I love you too." And I thought that was nice. So, but then we cut to Nita the next day as she's in Annapolis, Maryland, in a public library, I assume. And she is listening to all the Howlin' Henry CDs that are on file. And then she starts asking, "Hey, does anybody know, or do you have any more records about like Howlin' Henry?" And the librarian is like, "You know, we don't have that much, but I was actually there at one of his concerts one time, and let me tell you about it." And she talks about seeing Howlin' Henry getting beat up by men hired by the two producer guys. And so that's where we see basically that the contract that he signed was not good. And the guys even confess, like, "Oh, like, your lawyer, guess what? We talked to him an hour before you talked to him, and that's why he screwed you out of a bunch of money. So go fuck yourself." And then they pay some guys to beat the fuck out of him. And then that coincides as we turn the page, we see the mansion of one of those guys, the producer guys, and we see Howlin' Henry now, who's possessed, and he is coming onto their property, and there's a nice family swimming in a swimming pool, and he comes in and he tears them all apart. Once again with his tremors, multiple mouths, graboids coming out and ripping people apart. And this is the one where he kills kids and stuff. So, like, because it's like a full family, and he just murders everybody. Pretty graphically. He actually steps on one guy's head, completely smashes it. So,
yeah. Oh, see, that's a little different.
Yeah, well, the splash page is the same, right? The starting move is I'm gonna rip everybody apart with my tentacle mouth, and then, you know, this guy gets special treatment because his head didn't get ripped off. He just lost his legs first, but then he just smashes his head with his foot. So there you go.
But that's true. But we didn't see like there any like who this family is specifically.
No, but you could guess from the scene before that this has to be a family of one of those producer guys, you know?
Yeah.
Like, you could just, because it was right after that, they were insinuating just by the placement of it, this is at least one of those families, or one of that guy's family, like future, you know, in the future. Obviously the old guy wasn't there to be killed, but, or one of the producer wasn't there to be killed, but the rest of the family who was like in their, you know, mid 30s, 40s, and then their kids, they were all murdered. So I can assume that they're at least relatives of that guy. We also see Anansi like playing dice on the street to get money and stuff. And I don't know. That's why I was like, I'm not sure why he's here. He's just doing stuff. And then as he's playing dice, some cops come up, and it turns out they are possessed by demons, because this one demon, his name is Corzon, or Corson. He's the guy that's possessed inside of Howlin' Henry. And so apparently he's like, I'm going to cleanse the earth of all the evil, and I'm feeding off all of the evil in Baltimore because Baltimore is so evil. So I'm bringing kind of like demons here as well, and they're possessing other people. They specifically possess some of these cops who approach Anansi, and Anansi's like, listen, motherfuckers, you're just demons. I'm a god, so back the fuck off. And they do. He's like that powerful. He basically evaporates them. He's like, and they just like burn to death. And I was like, that's pretty badass. But yeah, like, I guess he's just there to see what's going on in the background with these other demons, kind of thing. So, um, yeah, and then Howland just goes back to where he normally goes. Although he does stop by, I guess now he knows that Nita is on his tracks, so he's like, I'm gonna make a stop and check out this Nita Hawes, and he goes to her apartment complex, and Nita is at her house, and Frankie calls and says, "Hey, we had another murder. It's this white family, and I think something's up." And then, like, maybe you could come over and look at the bodies and the evidence in the morgue. And right as she takes that call and says that, there's a knock on Nita's door, and right away the door bursts open without anybody answering, and Corazon or Howland Henry is standing there. And luckily for Nita, right behind him, and I guess, because Anansi is on his trail now because of those two demons that attacked him, but he appears as well, and he's like, back the fuck off. And so he saves Nita's life, luckily. And yeah, it's a whole thing. I thought this part was like a good way to build tension. Like, did you like the way that this kind of this story area felt like, how it flowed?
Yeah, I was curious where we were going with Anansi, as far as, like, I honestly assumed that he was doing this because maybe he knew about those police would be nearby and come. But
Once again, he's kind of there just for, like, these little moments where you need to explain something, like, how's he going to know, or how is she going to get saved? Well, the only thing that can stop a demon is a god. So let's have a god, come to Earth, and then we have to explain why he knows what he knows and all that. So I think that's why they put him in there, for, like, kind of not a Deus Ex Machina, but, like, he's another powered figure that can fight, because obviously Nita's not powered. So how's she going to fight a demon? And she's also not super religious or anything, So, but yeah, then we get to issue 4, and we get the scene where, I guess it's the scene where Howland Henry decided to sell his soul to Corazon. So it's the scene where he's having a nice picnic with his family. The record producers come up. This is after he's been beaten by them, I'm assuming. And he's like, I'm going to go, and I'm going to, all I need is my, record tapes and all this shit. And they're like, you're not going to get a goddamn thing. We're going to sue you into oblivion. Like, have fun living poor for the rest of your life, you son of a bitch. And that's where he's like, I'm going to sell my soul to the demon for revenge. And so that is, like, the moment he did it. And I guess that's why he disappeared, because he just kind of, like, got possessed, or maybe he had a certain amount of time before he got possessed. But they do say, like, once he fell into a coma, that's basically when the demon, like, took over his body.
Yeah.
So I think that was his like straw that broke the camel's back, like when they came to him with his family there. But then, like, maybe over the years, right before he went into his coma, he made the deal or something. But then we cut back to right now with Nita, and she pulls out a gun and starts shooting at Corazon. Of course, that doesn't really do much, but Anansi is there, and he's fighting with her. And so, yeah, like, we get, like, a breakdown from Anansi. Like, he explains a lot of what's going on. Like, oh, it's Corazon that, or Corson. He is, like, this demon who's, like, one of the 4 kings of hell. I was like, just because I've seen Hereditary, I'm like, oh, is the other one Payman? Like, but it is not. Apparently, I don't know which mythology. It says it's from, like, the King Solomon, the ones that were constrained by King Solomon. So it must be some kind of special demon lore or whatever that I don't know about. But yeah, he explains everything that's going on with them, and then Frankie calls in the police, because they're like, oh, he just left. Or I guess Nita calls Frankie and says, hey, our catatonic friend just visited me. And then she's like, oh, I'll call the police to scout around the area, and police do find him. And once again, we get the tear apart scene where he tears all these cops apart. this is about the page where I was like, okay, we get what you do. And the thing is, every time it is the same splash page. You know what I mean? Like every time he attacks, it's the same splash page.
And like I said, like, so like this one isn't as graphic because like there's lots of blood, but like we know it's gonna like hit it, bite a head or rip off an arm or whatever. But that's about all we get. So
yeah. And so these cops immediately after they get killed get possessed by demons, and then Frankie shows up and she gets overwhelmed by all of them who are attacking, and then luckily for her, Anansi's on the ball, so he shows up and he's like, "Hey motherfuckers, guess what? I brought some angels." And
I got some angels. Woo!
Yeah, so he somehow is in contact. This was another thing. I'm like, okay, he is like a Deus Ex Machina, because whenever you need the power to fight more demons or a bigger threat, he's the thing, right? Like he's the way that happens. And so just like, not his power is not enough now, so now he's got angels. How that works, I don't fucking know. I would think that, angels aren't really, Christian God and angels aren't being responsive to African gods or whatever, but maybe they'll hang out and have parties and stuff. Who knows? But he invites them to fight these demons, and they do, and that's helps everybody escape, at least, and fight. And then so Nita goes down to try to help as well, and Corazon he goes up to her and he reaches into her chest and he pulls her soul out and throws it down to hell. I did not see that coming. What do you think?
I didn't either, and I really like this too. I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, I just thought he was gonna kill her, and then it was like, nah, like I want your soul. I don't give a fuck about like this body or whatever. And so he throws her down to hell, and now she's surrounded by demons, and it's all crazy and shit. Okay, so here's a thing I thought was interesting. They don't address it at all, but I was just thinking about this as I was reading it. So Corazon is also down in hell. His like demon self is down there. But he's also on Earth possessing Hal and Henry. So like, I don't know why, but I always thought like, if you're a demon and you're possessing someone, you are no longer in hell. Maybe that's because of like Supernatural or something, the show.
Yeah, it must be because most of the demons, especially, well, we will say the kings of hell demons, they control multiple demons, and they are kind of, I would say, along the same, it's kind of, I was along the same lines of a god, like being able to be in multiple places at once and all knowing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, it makes sense because, like I said,
they're going on. So
yeah, he is a king of hell. I was just like, they never address it, but for some reason I noticed it, and I'm like, oh, I guess he's powerful enough to be in two places at once, which makes sense. But it's just because I'm like, all my demon knowledge comes from Supernatural or whatever. So it's however they did it. It's like if all your vampire knowledge came from Buffy or something. You're like, how come they're not disappearing when I stab
that's
them?
True.
It's like, oh, that's just a Buffy thing. So, so then we start issue 5 now that she's in hell, and we cut away.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
I wanted the very last page, basically, where she's like looking up at Corazon and like the other demons, and there's the one on horseback.
Yeah.
And then the one that was like,
he's just a guy with glasses.
Yeah, it's a guy with glasses. I was like, wait a minute, who is that guy?
Yeah, he looks like Dwayne McDuffie or something.
Yeah, that's Dwayne the Demon.
Yeah,
that guy.
Yeah,
that's all. I just thought that page was really fun. Like the art is really cool, and like the hellfire, and then Corazon with his huge wings and stuff, and then it's like, and then Jeff over there.
Yeah, that guy. There's just a naked guy there. So
yeah, who's this guy anyway?
Yeah, no, it was good. So then we start the next issue. We cut to the cemetery where there's an old man who's obviously one of these record producers. Now, there was always one of the producers that had sunglasses on or eyeglasses, depending on what time of day. The other one didn't. So I'm assuming this is that guy because he's an old man with glasses. And he's looking at the, I guess it's his family. That they were the people that were murdered and in the last issue. And they are being buried. So he's at their funeral. And he's looking at the headstone after their funeral, he's looking at the headstone of his partner who died already a couple of years back. So Corazon can't get revenge on that guy, but or at least maybe not on Earth. Maybe he's in hell or something. But one thing I liked is that this guy What's his name? The one with
Oh,
glasses.
I will say I thought this was funny. So it's Steve Carpenter's. That's the one that's
Okay.
alive,
Yeah.
and the one that died is Harvey Borchfield or whatever.
Yeah.
But I thought it's funny that their names were Steve Harvey.
There you go. I didn't even put that together, but it's probably not on purpose, but whatever.
Yeah, but whatever.
But yeah, so Harvey's tombstone, he's looking at it and it reads, inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1996. He's the architect of the blues. And I was like, oh wow, like that that could be angering for some people, because this white guy is the architect of blues. All right, interesting, but it's on his headstone. So yeah, like I just thought that was interesting. But obviously, this guy he's in fear for his life now because his family's been killed. Everybody that's has anything to do with the record industry has been killed. So maybe he's thinking, I'm going to be killed next. But, he's an old guy, so he's going to die anyway soon. But then we cut back to Nita in hell, and she's having flashes of, like, her parents when they were alive and all this stuff when they were, like, when her mom was pregnant with her brother Jason. And one thing I liked, this reminded me of, like, the scene in Terminator 2 when, like, the bomb goes off and Linda Hamilton's like, now on the fence, and then like she just turns to dust or whatever. Like her parents just turned to dust in the middle of this carnival ride, and I was like, oh shit, it's like Terminator. but then she we cut back to hell, and she's just standing, like they're showing her visions or something. And so then we cut back to Earth, where we see Nita's body is now comatose. Basically, she is alive but like brain dead, I guess you'd say. And so, or would that be? Is that what that would be? Like, it's not brain dead because her body's still dead. Working.
Yeah, just in a coma.
She's in a coma. Okay, she's comatose. So, no one knows why other than like Anansi, and Anansi's like, yeah, like her soul's in hell, and Frankie's like, what? Like, what's going on? And so Frankie basically has to start believing that, okay, I gotta believe in some of the supernatural stuff in order to get my friend back. And so in the meantime, I think we see the possession of a bunch more people that are like dead bodies and stuff. And I'm not exactly sure. I forgot what happens, like the main part of this issue. Do you remember? Like it's all them in hell and her talking.
That's basically, it's like, hey, I am like, I'm here, and I like, you're gonna be tortured because you have this like connection to the otherworldly.
Yes.
And
you know what? I will say that
you're in the way of my plans of being able to like do things without being known in the background, basically.
Okay. Yeah. That's okay. So I remember this issue. I kind of not turned my brain off in it, but this issue did feel like, why is this issue here? Because there's a lot of like her going back and forth in hell, and like while demons are rising on Earth and stuff, or like possessing people, she is like, they're like, oh, you have to go ride with this hell demon, or this king of hell, and go on a horse ride over here. And so they take her over there, and then they like put her on a cross, like in hell, to torture her, and it's just kind of weird. But at the same time, there's a guy who gets possessed in this one. There's a guy that gets possessed who's like in jail, and then he attacks all the police guards or whatever that are around the cell. I don't remember who he is, or maybe it's it is it's because the art is different. That's why I was like, wait, who's this guy? This is Howlin' Henry, because he's singing as he kills people. So I think Anansi was like, hey, you gotta put Howlin' Henry in jail for the night, at least put him behind some big bars, tie him up, or like handcuff him to the bed. And Frankie's like, well, that's really weird. I mean, but I guess we'll go with it because, he's the best suspect that we have, even though he's a comatose old man. So somehow he's tied to this. I guess I'll go with you. So they do that. They put him in jail while all this stuff is going on in hell with Anita, and he doesn't seem to be bothered at all by the handcuffs or bars, because once again we get a splash page of him tremorsing out and killing the cops that are in the police station. Um, and then in hell, what's going on is she is kind of being crucified, and what this hell that she's experiencing is all the guilt that she feels and like the pain in her life. So the person who's talking to her that comes up to her that's looks like a demon in his eyes, but is someone we haven't seen before in this comic, but we have seen in Philadelphia, is Jim Jr., the guy that left her to go to Philadelphia and is the star of that book. And so she's like, why did you leave me? All this stuff. And so there's like a bit of back and forth until her brother, who is a ghost, leaves Earth and comes down to save her. So he's basically like, get the fuck away from my sister. You're a goddamn demon. And she's like, oh no, like, don't. Why are you down here, brother? Like, I don't want you to be in hell. And he's like, don't worry about it. So a lot of this next issue that starts is her coming to terms with she's not the guilty one in her brother's death. And she's also not the guilty one, or she's also got to let go and forgive Jim Jr. for leaving her, And so one thing I will point out in the art in this, I guess it's Simon Kudransky doesn't live in a place where they know a lot about bullets and stuff. So there's a scene, they're reenacting the scene, or they're kind of talking about the scene when the brother gets shot in the head. And there's a gun that has a muzzle flash and the bullet's flying out of the muzzle. And the bullet is still in its case. So the bullet, normally when a bullet goes off, bullets are in a case. There's a primer on the back, it fires, and the only part of the bullet that comes off is the tip of it. So but in this case, they just have the whole bullet flying out of the barrel. And I was like, that is not how that works. So I thought that was funny.
When it's a dream supernatural bullet, maybe.
Maybe that's what it is. But I was laughing. I was like, that's not how it works at all. Like, who's the editor of this book? Because that's like very obviously something, one that you could fix, because it's like literally behind it is a very bright white light. So they could have just like colored that in and left the tip of the bullet there, but no one caught that. Bullets don't, like when you see a bullet, it's got the jacket and everything, the casing on it and everything. So like the bullet's just the very top of it. So that is what flies out of the barrel. So, but that's, with me, I got to point that shit out in comics because they never get that stuff right. Just like in Moon Knight where they had that revolver with a silencer on it. I was like, what? Like a revolver with a silencer, something you will never see in real life. But anyway, so yeah, she's going through her own kind of personal hell with dealing with these demons and the guilt from her brother and all that. In the meantime, we cut to the Carpenter estate where now the old man who was at the cemetery earlier this issue is, like I said, aware that people are possibly going to kill him. So he's hired all these guards, and there's like 50 men on site. And because now Hal and Henry broke out of the police station, he's immediately going for this house. So he goes there. Once again, tremors, graboids pop out of his head and kill all these guards. And that's what I was saying. Like every time it's the same layout almost of like, it's a full page splash, graboids out of the face, tearing apart bodies, but in the same way. So that's why I was like, it does get a bit repetitive. That's one of my few artistic. And the thing is, it spans through all the different artists of this book. So you would think if there was like more than one artist.
It's not artistic. That's the character. That's the demon.
I mean, it could just be the writing, right? Like maybe they really followed the script and he was just like splash page of, demons coming out of his mouth and tearing people apart. And they all took that literally and didn't try to kind of go extra on it, It doesn't look bad. It's just repetitive, So like I said, he's ripping all these people apart. No problem at all for him. Then we cut to hell and we see, and this is also like why the little brother has freed her, and it looks like, they don't know where to go really, but she has like at this moment, she's kind of escaped from, she's kind of like let go of her guilt. We'll say she's still on the cross, I believe. And her brother's talking to the demon that has her there. And right as he's talking, we see we see what's his name? Anansi
Anansi,
appears.
yeah.
And he, of course, once again, this is also repetitive. He's like, I didn't come alone. I brought angels, because the first time he brought angels. I was like, okay, like
it would have made a little more sense for it to just be at this part, at least, because he's like, sure,
yes,
he's in hell, so maybe he needs the backup.
yeah,
They might should have waited on that one, but
yeah, it kind of spoiled that big moment, because I was like, oh, this already happened. Like, so now, of course, in the meantime, back on Earth, we have Frankie, who's figured out that, oh, obviously, she's heard that Howlin' Henry has broken out, and he is probably going to go kill this old carpenter guy, or this old guy named Carpenter. And so she goes to his house and finds, a bloodbath, basically. Everybody's there, except Carpenter is in like a, was like a safe room, a panic.
Yeah, it's kind of like a panicky room, yeah.
Yeah, like that movie, Panic.
A panic room, yeah.
Yeah.
Panicky room.
Yeah.
I'm hysterical in here.
That's what you have, John. You have a panicky room.
I have a panicky room,
yes. And so, he's hiding out in there. Frankie comes in. They don't know where Howlin' Henry is at the moment, but then we cut back to hell, and it seems like the fight's going okay. There, at least they got Nita off the cross. Her brothers got her. Anansi opens up a portal to Earth and is like, you gotta go through. And then her little brother's like, I can't go with you. That one's for you. I'm gonna, like, now that we're good and you've let go of the guilt, I can pass on, kind of thing. And so she goes through the portal, and she automatically is back in her body and wakes up, steals an ambulance, and rides over to Carpenter's house. And I guess, probably Howlin' Henry was busy with the other 45 guards or whatever. So that's why he didn't get to the panic room before Frankie. But then eventually he does find out where they are. I guess he can kind of sense where Carpenter is. And he just tears through that door, and also the assistant that's in there with a gun. And Nita shows up at the house. And it's kind of like everything's coming to a head now. We see Carpenter's like, oh my God, it's you. And of course, Howlin' Henry's like, yeah, motherfucker. Like, it is me, and I'm going to kill you. And so he grabs a knife and he tries to stab, right before he grabs the knife, it's actually like the demon lets him go. The demon actually like releases, because Nita says, I don't even remember why she lets him go. She says something to the demon that makes him let Howlin' Henry go. And I think it's because she's like, why don't you let Howlin' Henry get the revenge, right? Like, this is his revenge. So like, why don't you let him get it? And he's like, okay. And then Howlin' Henry's like, all right, I want to kill this fucker too. Like, this wasn't like a one-sided, the demon made me do it thing. This is like, I wanted the power to be able to murder these people with extreme prejudice. So he takes a knife, and like, now that he's regular Howlin' Henry, he picks up the knife and he's about to stab Carpenter, and he gets shot by Frankie, who runs in and sees him before he can do anything. And so now that the demon's not inside of him, he dies, right? Howlin' Henry dies. And then we cut to, I guess, everything wraps up because of that, right? Like, everything's done. Nita leaves, and we cut to her writing all this on her blog, I assume. So we do see that the body of Howlin' Henry has been reclaimed by the police and stuff, and then they go to burn it. And as they put it in the fire, we do hear the body starts singing again like it was before. So it leaves it open-ended, like, ooh, maybe, Corzon's not dead, obviously, and maybe this guy comes back or something. So very interesting. I liked it. And that is the end. That is the last page of it. So, John, what would you give it, and what do you think?
I liked it a lot. Like I said, I feel like I hopped into it a little faster than Philadelphia, which, again, surprising, because usually the vampire stories get me a little more. But I liked it. It was fun. I think upon like kind of re-going over it, I think the Anansi stuff was a little like, oh, okay, yeah, that's like like you said, the MacGuffin, or the like, oh, okay, like we need a way to get out of this. So, because it would have been interesting if maybe she had some kind of power or way with her supernatural to get out of
Right.
hell
Well, you do
herself.
have the brother, right? The brother is a ghost.
Yeah,
He could have figured out some supernatural power that he had or something, you know?
true. Or if like we had seen Anansi and maybe like he only appeared in hell to help her get out to with the angels that way, it would have been a little more impactful, I think.
Right.
But overall, I still really enjoyed it.
Oh yeah.
I definitely would be, yeah, and it was cool that this was one story, and like now moving forward, like we know like the things that she's connected to, but again, this could be an episodic thing. Like you don't have to have one like you can have it can be her brother can be there and maybe she can still work through family stuff and whatnot. But in general, like this can be a issue to issue or a couple issue arcs.
Right, like
Like I
anthology style.
exactly. I feel like this would be really interesting to see where it happens because of that. Like there's more of a possibility of like you said, like different every single issue or every couple of issues. Like it seems like it'd be really interesting monster of the week or creature or
Yeah, for sure.
yeah. And I like necessarily like yes, there was a cop element to it, but it wasn't necessarily all just that investigation type thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I always like cop stories. I know some people don't. If they're done well, and I thought this was done pretty well. I liked the character of Frankie. I thought she was a good addition. So, so yeah, what would you give it then, John?
I think overall, I would give this one a 7.5.
7.5. That's good. Yeah, like this is definitely more my speed, like I said, than vampires. I don't remember what we gave Philadelphia.
That's true. I don't remember.
I will say these kind of did the reverse of each other. So Philadelphia, I started off like not loving it, and then by the end of it, I was totally into it. And this one, I loved it at the beginning. I was like, this is totally my speed. And the further we went in, especially that 5th issue, I was like, it just kind of slowed down. And then I was kind of like, okay, let's get to the good stuff. And then issue 6 was like a wrap up. So I would say that it kind of did the reverse of Philadelphia, where I liked it more at the beginning, this one, and towards the end, I was like, kind of like, oh, it's okay. But I would definitely continue reading it because I like you said, it definitely has a lot of potential to be really cool and have those one-off stories or like 2 arc stories or 2 issue stories that are like monster of the week, which would be fun. That's why I like Department of Truth, because there's an overarching story, but then there is also like the monster of the week thing, or like let's explore this part of the government or whatever, so you could definitely do that with this, more so than in Philadelphia, because Philadelphia is like vampire centric. We have a mission, and that mission is very specific. So you're not going to kind of go off on tangents like you can on this one. So I'm going to give this one, I think the same with you, 7.5. Actually, I'm going to give it a 7. I think I give Philadelphia 7.5. And what I did like about this one is it made me like Philadelphia more, like I said at the beginning, because it give it like a broader universe. And so I liked that they tied them into each other like that. It kind of made it feel familiar immediately because I've read Philadelphia. So I was like, oh, I know who James is. So like, I know who Jim Jr. is. So, yeah, it made me like, oh, I'm in the know. I'm like one of the cool kids. So, yeah, for sure. I'm going to give this one a 7. You gave it a 7.5. And like we said, we're going to do the exclusive episode, release that next week. And that will be of Truth, which is like the Black Captain America, the first real super soldier. So, and like we said at the beginning, if you'd like to become one of our patrons, and you can sign up at patreon.com/planes, trains, and comic books, all one word, at gmail.com. And with that, I think we're good to go. Anything you need to say?
No, I feel good. I appreciate everybody coming along our Black History Month again. Well, we always really enjoy doing and finding these creators that maybe we haven't had touched on the podcast before, or new ones. So I really was enjoying Rodney Barnes stuff, and I'm excited to I'm gonna sit down and read Blackula soon on my own, maybe do a little mini review.
Yeah, there you go. All right, well then we will see you guys on the next one.
On the next one.
Bye.